Breaking news from Iran, where state media says that President Raisi and the Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian died when their helicopter crashed on Sunday. The wreckage has been located and there are no survivors among those who were on board.
So that it is tempting to say, hey, it was just the president, not the Ayatollah, so none of this matters. But that is oversimplifying things. Then, on May 19, 2024, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi took a trip to his country's border with Azerbaijan. It was an important visit to inaugurate a dam and hydroelectric plant built along the country's river border. And it was not too long ago that there were concerns about a war between the two, with Azerbaijan trying to strengthen relations with Israel, and Iran having strong feelings about Azerbaijan's border with Armenia. Things seemed to be back on track with Iran's relations with Azerbaijan, and the trip itself was going normally enough, with Azerbaijan's Office of the President publishing these standard press release photos. But with the event concluded, it was time for Iran's president to head home, and that's when the trouble began. Returning to Iran aboard a Bell 212 helicopter like this one, it appears that the pilot struggled to navigate through a thick fog, and, unable to see in front of him, he ultimately crashed the chopper in East Azerbaijan, not far from the dam site.
You can see how bad conditions were in the area as the rescue operation was underway. A fleet of ambulances on standby. The army is reported to have ordered all resources needed to be thrown at the search. Members of Iran's Red Crescent scoured the rugged landscape on foot for any sign of the missing helicopter. But poor visibility made it difficult for the rescue teams to reach the scene of the crash, even to locate it.
There are currently 3 drone teams in the area, but due to the thick fog and low visibility, the drones were not able to successfully operate. There are also 3 teams with rescue dogs in the area. We are searching and we hope we'll be able to reach positive results very soon.
این همه لشکر آمده به عشق رهبر آمده ای پسر فاطمه تسلیت تسلیت.
In the immediate aftermath, the question turned to whether foul play was involved. Political scientists find such operations particularly concerning, because if so many countries do not like Iran at the moment, someone will be tempted to commit a sabotage operation, given the default suspicion might fall elsewhere. But that ironically makes the likelier suspects tempted to attack, because there is no guarantee that it will trace back to them. And we know from some recent attacks on Iranian targets that this can lead to some more serious escalation concerns, even if a true powder keg has not yet exploded. However, the prevailing theory at the moment is that this is just a case of bad piloting. Now, I realize that this argument is a bit circular, but for the sake of world peace, it is fortunate that the crash happened in bad weather conditions, and not under clear blue skies. There is, of course, always the possibility that Iran uses the potential for sabotage to create a crisis that was not actually happening. After all, Iran's population would have a difficult time knowing for a fact that the accident was truly due to pilot error. It would be easy to dismiss Raisi's death as politically irrelevant for the country of Iran. After all, Iran is an autocracy, and the real political power lies in the hands of the Ayatollah. Then again, that perhaps overstates the relationship. It might help to think of the president as sometimes setting Iran's agenda, deciding whom to meet with and whom not to, with the Ayatollah exercising final veto power. Nevertheless, The crash raises both long-term and short-term political power problems within the Islamic Republic. In the long run, Raisi was a consensus likely successor to Ayatollah Khamenei, and indeed, Khamenei himself took the president to Ayatollah path. Now, I say consensus likely successor, because we are basically back to doing Kremlinology here. For all that everyone makes about Putin's age, or Trump's age, or Biden's age, Khamenei has them all beat at 85 years young. In fact, to give you a better sense of the situation, he was born before Germany invaded Poland. Meanwhile, the short run may bring about even greater changes. According to Iran's constitution, Iran's first vice president becomes acting president once the Ayatollah gives his consent, which he already has done. The successor's politics appear roughly similar to his predecessors, and he comes pre-sanctioned by Western leaders. So that is not the important story here. Instead, the government has 50 days to run another election to fill the position properly. And again, it would be easy to dismiss the election of a somewhat powerless president who is caught up in an autocratic system. With the 2021 election of Raisi, Raisi was a hardliner, known by his detractors as the Butcher of Tehran, for his role in the 1988 execution of thousands of political prisoners on the order of Ayatollah Khomeini. His time in office saw a strengthening of Iran's axis of resistance against the West and Western-aligned parties in the region, with alleged increased proxy support to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Syrian government, and the Houthis, as a part of Iran's broader conflict with Israel and Saudi Arabia. Never mind that Iran is perennially on the verge of building its first nuclear weapon. Forget Mossad. You would be forgiven to think that Amazon was responsible for the whole situation. Aside from that, Iran has also played a key role in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, supplying a large number of Shahed drones for Russian use on targets deep inside the country. The impending election will therefore be a surprise referendum on these policies, and autocracies do not like surprises. Of the contentious policies, Russian military assistance is the least likely to change. It brings in a ton of money and is part of what funds the rest of Iran's operations. Plus, the Kremlin took a proactive approach here, first posting condolences Monday morning on the official Kremlin website, and followed up by a phone call to Iran's acting president. That said, a step back from any segment of the axis of resistance is not likely either. The only way that might arise is if turnout and vote numbers break so heavily against the status quo policy that the government feels that it is necessary to calm domestic tensions. Still, there may be some fleeting benefits for the West there. Security forces in Iran can only do so much at once. And yes, there is some division between those overseeing the situation at home and those overseeing the situation abroad. But the short-run demand for security at home will take away some level of that focus abroad. The question is whether any of Iran's regional rivals can do anything of note with that window of opportunity. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility there is the first steps of a grand bargain among the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. The State Department was already spending much of its bandwidth on that project, with multiple visits to the key players in question. But Israel's offensive into Rafah as a part of the Gaza war will remain a major stumbling block there. Though the Israeli domestic politics on the entire situation is about to reach a boiling point, and any serious movement may have to wait for a new prime minister. Suffice it to say that the gods of international relations chose an interesting time for a helicopter to crash. And, as usual for these sorts of breakpoints, there is a high probability that not much happens, and a low probability that a whole ton of stuff happens, with not much room in the middle for an average outcome.
Raisi, seen here earlier with his counterpart from Azerbaijan, is a hardliner, number 2 to the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei. who is the ultimate authority in Iran. Also missing is Iran's foreign minister, a familiar figure on the international stage. He'd been involved in many negotiations, including over the country's nuclear program. Regime supporters came out to pray for the president. These images broadcast on state-run TV. Though not everyone in Iran is praying for his survival. The regime is not popular with many Iranians who'd like to see an end to the Islamic Republic. But from its most senior leader, a message of calm, of continuity.
Hope that God will return the president and fellow travelers to the people. The Iranian nation must not be worried, and rest assured there will be no disruption to running of the country.
Late at night, there's still no news of the fate of the president and his foreign minister. Several Arab countries have offered assistance. Turkey has sent a mountain rescue team, and the EU will help with a satellite mapping service at the request of Tehran. The world is watching closely what happens next in Iran.
So tell us about who the president was, what his role is in Iran, and what his death will mean for the country.
President Ebrahim Raisi was a totally different president compared to his predecessors because, for example, Rouhani was, they all had their disagreements with the Iranian supreme leader who's at the helm of the politics in Iran. He holds most of the power. Ebrahim Raisi was considered to be his protege. He was a yes man. He did not had any disagreements with the Iranian president. So, and his presidency is one of the most short-lived presidencies. He did not even make it to the third year. And he started his, he came to power when he was just an 18-year-old in the judiciary system that later on became known as a kind of committee of death because they issued a lot of death sentences back in the 80s to many Iranian dissidents. And that's why many human rights organizations, when he came into 2022, when he became a president, many human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, asked for investigations for him about crimes against humanity. So, and then he became the custodian of Imam Reza's shrine in Mashhad. The importance of that is where the money and the power is. So he reached the source of money and power at the very young.
ملت ایران و جهانید همه با هم حسین حسین شعار ماست شهادت افتخار ماست این همه لشکر آمده به عشق رهبر آمده ای پسر فاطمه تسلیت تسلیت خونی که در رگ ماست هدیه به رهبر ماست من تقاضا دارم از عزیزانی که در خیابان قدس و خیابان‌های اطراف